Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast, a weekly podcast discussing innovative ideas in business and technology from unconventional and often overlooked sources. I'm your host, Tanner and Wyatt, here with your other host,
Wyatt Carson. Hi, Tanner.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, so we had a few weeks of one-on-ones with us. We enjoy those. I don't know if anyone else listens to those, but we enjoy them. But what we have been getting a lot of comments on is our interviews, and I think we have a really cool one this week. I did my research. Okay, I did preliminary research, and today we're going to talk with Ben Blecha. Shoot, did I say that name right? Yes. Yeah. We can leave that in. Who cares? Ben Blecha, I'll let him introduce himself. But Tanner, can you tell us how you met Ben and how this came to be today real quick?
Yeah, so a previous interview we did with Andrew Ambritz from Sainer's Bakery, we were chatting after we were done recording. And God goodness, we talked for maybe an hour and a half after. And he was like, you need to meet Ben. Ben is doing everything that you guys talk about and want to talk about on the podcast. Ben's been doing. He's from Southwest Nebraska, started business in this area, buys businesses to bring into this area, and just really encompasses everything that, we talk about for rural business development, entrepreneurialism, everything. So reached out to Ben, and thankfully he's available to join us. So welcome.
Thank you. That's nice to be here.
Yeah, so Ben, let's start. Where in Southwest Nebraska are you?
I'm in Binkelman. We have stuff in McCook as well.
For those who don't know, Binkelman is what, 20, 30 minutes from the Colorado border, right? It's pretty close.
It's about as southwest as you can get, right?
That's true.
Well, Hagler's more southwest. So we're 3 miles from Kansas and 30 from Colorado.
That's as southwest as you can get. So both Tanner and I very familiar with Binkelman, the area. So okay, so Ben, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Well, first off, why'd you accept an interview podcast from us, and then really just kind of give us the elevator pitch of who you are and what drives you. What are you working on?
Maybe that's a little bit scattered right now, but it's starting to come more into focus again. You looked at my LinkedIn, so it says passionately curious on it. That might be my downfall in ways too. But right now, what I've been doing is trying to build we have a veterinary bracing, physical therapy, rehab kind of business that we're buying other businesses, small businesses, and bolting them on into what we're doing. So my original background, my professional background, I'm a certified prosthetist and orthotist. So I had bone cancer when I was in high school, and then I had my leg amputated when I was in college, and I was actually, I don't know what I was studying. I went to school for college for like 8.5 years. So then I ended up switching to prosthetics and orthotics. So I have some engineering background, and I was going to be a high school football coach and math and science teacher for a while. But I kind of steered towards that because of my amputation. And but I remember when I was in school telling my classmates that, hey, I'm not going to be doing this in 5 years. And they're like, why are you spending $100,000 on this and not going to be doing it in 5 years? And I knew then that there was like more that I wanted to learn and whatnot. And I kind of bounced around the country, working for different companies in that field. I worked for a university, and then I went and worked for Shriners Children's Hospital. So it was like a nonprofit. And then I went to, it's kind of a mid-major process. They had like 20 offices. And then I went and worked for the largest corporation in the world for that industry. And then I went and worked for a mom and pop. And I was about a year at each of them. But they talk about millennials and Gen Z bouncing around. I'm Gen X. I was doing the same thing. But like I felt like I was learning something from each of them, but like it just nothing was right. And at some point I just need to be in control and build what I want to. And then that's when I kind of started to figure out that I was kind of an entrepreneur. And so I went out on my own. Initially I was going to open a practice in Denver, where I was most recently, but I had a non-compete with the company that I left. So I kind of retreated here with the intention of being here for 6 months. And that was 17 years ago. So when I got back here, there's people that were trying to help in different ways and get me started. And I don't know. I've gone through different cycles. Like my private practice failed, but I had started making prosthetics for and braces for dogs up in Denver. My uncle's a veterinarian in McCook, Dr. Watkins, Redwell Animal Clinic, and there was this veterinarian in. He had a show on Animal Planet called Emergency Vets. And he would fly out here to go hunting with Dr. Watkins. And so Wayne told me, he said, hey, you need to go check this place out. And so I started making – this was like a high-end place. It was like better than the hospital that we had in McCook. They had MRI machines, like all sorts of bells and whistles that we didn't have here for animals. And so – like I kind of got on the front end of this wave of there's about 3 other people in the world and me that were kind of starting this entire industry. And so once I wasn't married yet and I didn't have kids. And so I was like, yeah, if it happens, and then once Renee was pregnant with Henry, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should become a little bit more serious in my life. And so, Dr. Watkins and his wife, Lori, who's my aunt, they ended up investing. And so we started growing that, and it was 2011, I guess. So we started growing pretty fast, and I got worried about how we were going to be able to manufacture. And Burns Lab was a long-standing foot orthotic lab in McCook, and they were actually one of the innovators of that entire industry of foot orthotics for podiatrists. The Burns family had several podiatrists in the family, and they had an international reach. And so I reached out to them to see if they were for sale, and they weren't. Somebody told me that they were. And for some reason, just like within like 2 hours, it clicked, like this would fix it. Like this could be my manufacturing. And so I was, I went into Mark Graff at MNB. I was like, hey, I hear this is for sale. I've never met Mark Graff. And I was like, could you introduce, or it wasn't introduce me, or I heard this is for sale. I was like, is there any way that you could help me pull this off? Cause I didn't have enough money to do it at that point. And he's like, well, I hadn't heard it was for sale, and let me check. And so I didn't get to Perry, which was 3 miles out of town, and he called and said, no, it's not for sale. So then I had the rest of the hour drive home, and I was like, no, it's for sale. I got to figure out how to do this. How was that? So I knew Rex Nelson. He was the head of economic development, and I knew that he was friends with Mary Thorson, that was the manager of their facilities. And so I had him introduced me, and so then there was a quiet meeting at Loop's, Jason Loop's accounting office in Benkelman when they were coming back one day, and we started trying to figure things out. And about that same time, I got into Pipeline, which is a big entrepreneurial accelerator for tech startups in Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri. And so I was kind of an outlier in that. They hadn't accepted any rural entrepreneurs. And so I got in touch with, I was trying to figure out all these different funding ways, and VC or Invest Nebraska had been was trying to do some different things. And so I spent like a year trying to figure out how to package this together and to be able, because again, I didn't have any money. I mean, but that doesn't have to be the stopping factor of buying a $1 million business, but it's like there's got to be a way. So it ended up the family financed me in doing that for the transition, and we had some hiccups with that. There were some key people that left, and that was probably one of the toughest years of my entrepreneurial life. We had to lay off some people, and it was just, I had a tiger by the tail, and I don't think they knew quite everything that was going on either. And fortunately, they were really good about working through it with me and making sure that we could do what we could keep the industry going. And so that's still going as Hen Hat. Hen Hat is Henry and Hattie, my son and daughter. So it's in what used to be the Alco building. We rent some space out from that, and some fun things that are happening with that, I guess. When I was going through all that tech stuff, I kept telling everybody that one day this will be a scanner. And they're like, yeah, whatever. I was like, no, it's possible to do this. Because going back to my engineering days, I was like, no, you can do it with this.
And this is a cell phone for the people that are just listening.
Yeah. And so I remember too. So when we were trying to do the tech stuff, when I was going through Pipeline, we were actually using Connect. I don't know if you remember the gaming system Connect, where like it would see how you would move, mm-hmm. and that's how you control the machines. And Microsoft actually had the rights to all of that. And so there's an algorithm for it that you could use to turn it into a 3D scanner, and it did a 3D scan very quickly. And so my intention was to 3D scan the dogs to make the braces. But going through that, it became apparent that Microsoft was abandoning that technology. So like I missed that wave.
And Ben, if you could explain to the audience too about the hero braces and all of that stuff for people who might not be familiar.
Sure. So the dog braces is hero braces, and basically our main product in that is knee braces for dogs. So, dogs tear their ACL more often than humans do. And so, but if they tear their ACL, the surgery is between $6,000 and $8,000. And so people can't come up with that out of pocket just on a whim. So, what our braces do are help the dogs that can't have surgery. And so we have some other braces too that help some other conditions, but that's our primary one. And so that was the company that we're growing. And it's continued to grow with that. But our intention was the problem that we're having with scaling that company is to make a brace for an animal, it has to be custom made. So if you or I were to tear an ACL, there's 14 different sizes for adult humans. Well, there's 200 or 300 breeds of dogs. And so, do a little bit of math, you'd have to have all sorts of sizes. And so the tooling to make all those sizes and mass produce that, it would just be insane. And so we have to do it custom. And so the current process is taking a cast of the leg, and then that cast comes to us. They cut it off and it comes to us, and we fill that full of plaster and make a model of the leg. And then we manufacture the brace to that animal. So there's a lot of tedious things in that. So we were looking at how do we do 3D scanning and change this process. There's some other problems with 3D scanning a dog because, one little hair from their fur sticking out, 4 inches from the body, as it scans it can make this weird shape in what you're trying to 3D scan. And so there's some problems with it that we continue to try to work through as an industry. But it's limited how much we can scale that company. And so though we continue to grow and we've worked on, we have, in last August, there's a conference at the University of Cambridge in the UK, and there was research presented on our braces. So we're doing all these different things that you do to grow it, but it's slow incremental growth. And I get bored sitting and being patient. And so through that, basically I want to grow 2,000 jobs in Southwest Nebraska. I'm saying that publicly. I've been saying it for a long time, but I have this big, bold thing. And so I can't do it at this slow of growth in this. And so what we started doing is acquiring other businesses that are very closely related. I sit in all these exhibit halls in this veterinary space, and I've met all these people over the years. And there's a lot of them that are now in their 60s and 70s that are looking for exit plans. And so what we're doing is we're going to those owners, and because I've gone through these different acquisitions, I'm working with them and bringing them in. Some of the businesses will stay where they are, that we're in negotiations with. Some of them will bring here. Like the most recent, we acquired Medipaw at the beginning of the year. It's a boot that covers bandages. So a dog has his leg bandaged and then goes and plays in the mud and muck. Then they have to change the bandage right away. So you just put this boot on that's like, think like the tingly high waiter boots or something for dogs. And so, but those are manufactured in China and Taiwan, and then they have some suits that cover bandages as well that are manufactured in Colombia. So over the next 5 or 10 years, I want to move all that manufacturing back to the States and be able to manufacture that stuff here. And as we add those on, so there's a much bigger plan in it, and it continues to grow.
So you mentioned that accelerator that's across Nebraska, Kansas, and stuff, and being a little bit of an outlier. Do you have any specifics that you can share with us that you learned from that, or certain things that you were able to teach them, like what someone from a rural community could really bring to the table?
Oh, I don't know that I taught them anything, but so I'm pretty bad because I haven't been a part of it in quite some time. It was like 10 years ago. I learned a ton, and but I guess the hiccup for me with it was what they were trying to prepare us for was trying to raise capital for angel investors, VCs, and in this phase trying to accelerate your growth before you're going to exit. So what does exit mean? Do an IPO or, be acquired or whatever. And so that was a lot of what they were teaching, was just how to raise money. I mean, there's other things that we're learning with it, just being around all these great entrepreneurs. But think about what I was trying to do. So I've already told you that I was trying to grow jobs here. I was trying to grow manufacturing jobs. And so let's just assume I raised $2 million from a VC, okay? And I took my business and I grew 200 jobs in Benkelman, Nebraska, that has a population of 800, right? And most of half of those are retirement age already, not quite, but it's an aging population. So I bring all these people in. Okay, that's great. I'm the champion. Like, I saved Main Street. I probably saved, the next 2 towns' main streets. Like, yeah, hooray, you're a hero. Okay, but I accepted venture capital money to do this. Okay, now venture capital, what they want to do is they want to grow a business very fast. They don't care about your profitability other than the fact that you don't run out of money before we exit, right? And they, in 5 to 7 years, they want to exit. And what an exit means is they're going to sell it to somebody, you're going to do an IPO, but they're going to take their money out and they're going to talk to you again and say thank you and buy you a beer at the next meaning that you're going to try to raise more money, right? But you're really not going to see them again, especially being in rural Nebraska. So what does that mean for the next iteration? Well, you accelerated a business that you grew really fast, not worrying about profitability, but the next people want to turn it profitable. So what do they say? Well, how do I make it profitable? I send it to China, or I send it to India, or wherever to have it manufactured. And okay, we're going to save a few jobs. So you just went from 200 jobs down to 40 jobs if you're lucky. Even, they might move you to some dog loving area in Boulder or but basically the exit means you just pulled those 200 jobs. So everybody was, for the 5 years that you grew all these jobs, they're figuring out how to fix Main Street and put a new swimming pool in and change the infrastructure of your town. And then you just ripped it all completely away. Right. And you can say, well, maybe you can find a venture capitalist with a heart. Well, yeah. And if they get replaced, there's too many intangibles. Like, you signed up for this in taking this kind of money. So I had to come and figure out how to do this in a different way without taking venture capital.
Wyatt and I just finished up Founder University, which is the same kind of like an incubator and things. And one of the big realizations that we had too was everything is venture capital. They put in their money with the expectation they're going to get, a certain return, and they want a high return. They're shooting for unicorns to get 1,000x their money. And there was a couple of things. One, they said the line that stuck with me is venture money is jet fuel, and you only put jet fuel in a jet or a rocket fuel. You only put it in a rocket. If you put it in a car, it'll explode. If you put it on a bicycle, you're going to crash and it's going to explode. And so your business really has to be tailored to specifically the things that they want to, launch and go to the moon theoretically. And then the other part that was crazy for us, because we have full-time jobs, we have families and all this stuff, they wanted you to go all in because they don't care about you per se. They care about their investment. And so they were like, we want you to quit your job. If you, take even like $25,000, $50,000, they're like, we want you, 200% in, sweating, living, breathing that. And it's just not realistic for most people.
Well, and I mean, I get it. That's the way it's set up. I mean, and so like, I'm not going to change the way venture capital is tailored. Right. I mean, and so just be realistic about that. And I don't want to villainize them either, because it's a part of our economy that needs to be there for some things that wouldn't happen. Like, people wouldn't take those risks, on some of those things. And so, I don't know. But it's broken trying to get finances in rural America too.
Yeah, talk about some of those obstacles, because I talk about some of those obstacles because I've heard this from others. Financing, an entrepreneurship financing, business financing is difficult in rural parts. What are some of those obstacles you think why that is?
Well, one, and please, like, bankers out there, I'm not trying to bash you. I mean, this is just the way it's set up over cycles of bank failures, and we're just coming out of some bank failures, right? There'll be new regulations and whatnot that goes from it. But the banking system, like, I guess when I grew up, maybe I was starry-eyed and I thought that banks were there to lend you to help, but the banking system isn't set there to lend to people that don't have money, right? And that's one thing that we just have to understand better is, like, banks have to be collateralized. Like, if you're going to buy a farm, they're only going to lend you 60% of the farm value. So you have to come up with 40% through whatever other version. That's and part of the reason that it's 60% is because of the bank failures in the ag industry in the 80s. Basically inflation from the 70s brought it up so high, the valuations, they were lending everybody like, oh, your land's worth $4,000 an acre. I'm making numbers up. And so we'll lend you $3,800 on it. Well, then all of a sudden when it deflated and went down to $2,000, then all these loans were upside down, right? And so they're baking this in now. Well, all these banks are ag lenders, and if you're trying to start something in a small town, they're trained in thinking about ag lend. They understand how much a cow can return. They're very, very good at it, and they're not as good as understanding these variables in all these other businesses, right? And so they're apprehensive in doing that, and even the best ones are, okay, because they don't. Those hard. If you're in entrepreneurship, there's always going to be days. I don't care how good you are at it. There's going to be days that you're like, how freaking out. How am I going to make payroll? And it's just, there's cycles in it that you can't control. I mean, all of us want to control it. We try to control all these variables, but in the end, we're not God. If you think that you are, and we stress over this, like, I think I have some sort of control over it, I don't. So banks, like, they're really risk adverse, right? Because if a bank in Benkelman fails, the entire county fails, right? If everybody loses their money, like happened at SVB, well, they're getting it paid back, right? But in the 80s, if all the farmers lose their money, that's a lot worse for Main Street than one business failing that them not putting the money into, right? And so then you have some SBA backing, right? And that was always hey, you can go talk to SBA. Well, there's so much bureaucracy in that. We had a huge influx through the PPP and EIDL that, like, I really view, like, at some point the SBA, the volume will be turned up on it to help bridge some of this stuff. But I mean, that's also wishful thinking, because it's really tough to get it through that. And then you have your local economic development people that have tried to, put together a little fund like $40,000 or something like that to try to help some stuff. And then there's some other funds like REAP and NEF, I think, in Nebraska that have some funds maybe up to 100,000 or 200,000 that you can go after. That's all loans in that, if you can do that. But again, it's really tough with a startup business plan that for me, like I'm talking about making dog braces. Nobody in the world was making dog braces, and I want to do it in a town of 800 people in the middle of nowhere, right? Like as much as like they knew me and knew how smart I was and what I did, like, hey, you're good in school. Like that's just, it's scary for them to gamble on it. And then you can go to some angel money, right? But people don't. So how do you value a business? Like, I mean, it's just it's a rhetorical question, but like if you asked even people that know how to value it, if you asked 10 people, you could get 30 different valuations. Right? And so like how like if I've been trained this way and then I'm going to talk to 4 angel investors and they're like, I don't value it that way. So there's a lot that you have to work through in doing that. And I mean, Andrew Ambrose and I and Jared Muhlenkamp and a lot of us have talked about this. Craig Softly. I was trying to think who else, but there's a lot of us that have talked about this as like, we need, like, Lincoln and Omaha have a Nebraska Angel Fund, and basically what they do is the Angels don't want to have all the entrepreneurs have access to them, right? Like I don't have time to talk to all of you and vet all this. So they have a front person that goes and vets all the deals, okay? And then the ones that they've worked through and get it to a point, then they bring them through, and then they have a group a panel that they present to, and then one person on that panel that kind of knows that industry a little bit kind of takes the lead and kind of helps, and then all the others kind of trust that their judgment on that, right? But we don't have anything like that out in rural Nebraska, and there's farmers with lots of money that don't like. I'm sorry, I don't want to put it in a CD and get 1% anymore, or I don't want to do this, and I want to help Main Street, but I don't have time to sit and learn your business and run my business and my farm and all that, and so we need to have that structure set up out here. I can't be the person that vets it. I mean, I probably know more how to do the deals than most of them, but I can't be the one asking for the money and telling you how to set up the structure.
Make your life a lot easier.
Right? But it would be. Yeah. Here's how you do the deal. So the way that I've gone about it is a lot of times is just going and asking these owners, like, they don't have an exit. And so they become the bank for at least a substantial part of it. We use our cash flow for the down payment, but I'm basically stepping outside of the banking system because, well, they also know how hard it is too to be able to do that. So there's risk. I mean, I try to look at. I try not to get myself too, heavy on how much I'm amortizing and all those things. I try to go. I know some of the ratios that the banking industry wants, and so I try not to go way crazy out of it. But I'm still trying to grow, and that's I need that that capital to be able to do it. And I don't know. That's how I've kind of gone about it, and developing those relationships with other business owners, and they become my mentors too. I learn a lot from them, and bringing, because they ran their business for 20 or 40 years, and so I've kind of built my own support system in that. I guess.
So if you were starting over today, like if you were, when you first started, is that kind of the path you would take, or what would be the structure now, knowing what you know now, to first start your business to kind of get off the ground?
Well, so I think one mistake that I made early on was, so when I was in Denver, when I was still first trying to start my business, I had gone to SCORE, something retired entrepreneurs, and the SBA, and they had a business writing course, business plan writing course, and I went to that, and they had different people come and talk, and there was a banker, he's a commercial banker. Sorry, words. A commercial banker that came in, and he basically, this was in 2005 or 6, and he was like, listen, don't come to me with a loan, with a business plan that you're not asking for at least $250,000. And everybody kind of sat back, because you're doing some math, like, I can do this for 40,000 or 70,000. And he's like, no, you're setting yourself up for failure if you do that. He said, I don't care if you're just a pizza truck on the corner. You still need to have enough buffer. You have to pay yourself. You have to pay your mortgage. Like, you think that everybody's going to want this in the first 6 months. It might take 4 years before you're cash flowing. And so you have to build in that. And so when I first moved back, I think I had some car debt and some student loan debt, maybe $100,000 of debt, which I was servicing. It was a lot of debt, but like I was making $70,000 a year when I was in Denver, so like I could service that. But then once I quit, I wasn't making that, so that it made it so I wasn't bankable, right? And so the bank ended up, they knew me and they said, we'll lend you $25,000. And so in my mind, they knew what this other commercial banker knew, that you were going to need $250,000 to pull this off. But they didn't. And the 25,000, I stretched them up to 55,000, but then they're like, no more. And so basically they gave me enough rope to hang myself with, right? I got out there far enough. I'm over the edge and I'm pulling like, no, I need more. Like, they told me I need, like, don't you know this? And things like, hey, I can make 70,000 if I leave here. Like, I'm good for it. I'm good for it. And not, like, all these panic things come out, which sabotage you too, right? Because if you're panicked, they're like, no, I'm staying away from this guy, right? And so that first banker didn't want me to do an SBA loan. It's like, oh, we'll just do this. Well, the problem was then I wasn't bankable for an SBA loan after I got in that far. I kind of hosed myself, right? I'd messed up my ratios that they needed and all these different things. And so I should have done that first. I should have pushed the SBA limit as far as I could have to be able to do that. But as far as just starting, I think I probably should have asked for help sooner. I should have asked for an angel to come in, and I know there's people that don't know, like, my aunt and uncle, I was just fortunate that they were in my family and they wanted to help me. And it's tough to be able to ask that. And, but that was, they gave me enough rope to get past hanging myself at least. And I learned through that. I mean, I remember being scared to death of borrowing the $25,000, but then I've also borrowed $2.1 million, and it's scary too, but I don't know that it was any different scary. I think you start to get the feel for what you can do and what those things are and that cash flow. So you don't have to go in big to start with, but it's kind of that boiled frog thing. You start to learn and it turns into bigger and bigger.
So you kind of hit on it. You've been through a journey. This business that you started really kind of recently kind of kicked off in 2011, I believe you said. And, but now you're in Binkelman, Nebraska, population 800 people. I used to go to like junior high dances there. Now you're in Binkelman, Nebraska, and you're buying or trying to acquire other businesses. So I appreciate the journey and hardships, but how'd you get here? I mean, it sounds like you overcame that obstacle, or at least figured out enough tips and tricks to manage it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you've got it all figured out. Not what I'm trying to insinuate by any means, but it sounds like with the help of these friends, these families, with your connections, you started to kind of build what you've been trying to since 2005 in Denver, right? You're finally. Would you say if you could go back and talk to 2005, Ben, would you say that you have made that dream, or you are actively in that? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, it's all a journey. Like, I don't know. As soon as you get something figured out, like I push the boundary again somewhere else, and I break something else. And I have theories of what will work and what won't, obviously from my past with it. And then, the world's pretty awesome, and just what you can learn on Google, what you can teach yourself on YouTube. And I started doing an MBA and like, I was just like, all these students are just, you just got to do it. You can't learn by books for everything. I mean, and I think I have a skill to just dive into the deep end that others don't. I think some people think that I don't recognize a risk, but I think a lot about risk. I do, that I've learned a lot of the things that I didn't know that should be as risky, but through each of them, I learned, like, if it doesn't go well, I call it that was my tuition. It's tough to, if you give specific things, I can probably take it back to a traumatic point and somebody that taught me something this is when I figured it out. But there's just so many things that you just continue to unpack and learn from as you go. But I don't think you can do it without just jumping in and doing it. And all the theory in the books is great, but when the rubber hits the road, like half of it gets thrown out the window.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
I just finished a book called The Greatness Mindset, and what you talked about previously kind of aligns with one of the concepts of a meaningful mission. So you talked about how your goal is to employ, was it 2,000 people in Southwest Nebraska? And that in some ways is your meaningful mission, and everything that you do that you're doing in business is geared towards that. So you're not getting distracted by, I can grow, we're growing and we're doing okay, but it's not actually going to get you to your end destination. And I think that, and why I was talking about this journey, if you had that for a while, that's really been very much a guiding thing where it's like, okay, I can, if I reach out, I take that risk, I do it, that gets me closer. If I fail, well, it's not even necessarily a step back. It's just, okay, I got to go through a different path to get there or something along those lines. It's a neat way.
Yeah. And it's tough. I mean, that's been a guiding thing for a while, but I've still gone through a few phases of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Like, right before the pandemic. So when I first moved back, I was like all involved with trying to be economic development and trying to get businesses and help businesses. And I just felt like I got done wrong, I guess, on a couple different things. And it was going into the pandemic and I was pissed and I was like, F this place, I'm leaving. And I actually went back to school and got my master's in prosthetics and orthotics. I was going to go teach at a college and write a textbook about dog braces and just be done. I was, and I mean, and these are all good people that like, I don't hate them or anything like that. It's like, man, I've been busting my ass. You give me a break on this one, and I don't want to get in deep to it, but I was jaded. I was like, I pushed my limits. I was at that in limit. And that was like the thing that made me crack. And so, but my intention was like, I cared about the people that were working with me. It was going to be set up that they were going to continue to be able to function in the business, and I was just going to leave. And then one day, my 8-year-old daughter was walking home from school, and it was like an hour after school was out, and I realized I didn't know where she was. But the thing that struck me was I wasn't panicked, and I was like, and this is probably isn't the best way to promote small towns. We get pedophiles coming in from it, but there's all sorts of people that are protecting, right? And I knew that she was okay. She could walk around town and people were going to be watching out for her. And I was like, I don't know that there's anywhere else in the world that I felt like I could do that. And so I was like, okay, so I need to be here until she graduates from high school. And then I can go. I like, my wife and I, we adventure. We go like seeing different places, new things all the time. And so that's always been kind of the thing. This was going to be our base, and then we're going to travel and go do different things. So, so I said, okay, so I'm not going to go be a professor somewhere. So what am I going to do? I'm miserable in the fact that this isn't growing the way that I want it to. So I have to figure out a different. So I started doing this bolt on more with what was going on with it. But, originally that guiding thing was, hey, I had cancer. Throughout my cancer, like the community was phenomenal supporting me. There's just really good people here supporting me. And then I leave for 13 years for college and travel around. I come back and Main Street's decimated. And I'm like, I have a skill set. Like I can revive this. And, so like this is why God kept me around, and those types of things. And so, yeah. And just the big dreaming comes up with the 2000, it's not just 2,000 jobs. It's 2,000 middle-class jobs. So I want good paying jobs that I'm creating. So it's good to have that guiding part, but it's still like, even with that, there's times that are really tough to stay the course. And especially if you're an idea person, like, scroll over there, and that's been a thing that's been hard to learn, of like, how do we stay within our wheelhouse?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, because I'm about to take a hard right turn on this conversation. So please, Tanner, you go first.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. So you're bringing in businesses from all across the country. You're wanting to bring in all these people. How are you finding what good people? Because that's the biggest part of it all is how do you bring people into your business? How do you, acquire these to add to your team? How do you kind of filter that and what values do you look for?
Yeah, so good people, right? I use the air quotes there. So you're in Omaha. There's a guy in Omaha when I was going through Pipeline. Can't think of his name now. He's a prick. Sorry. But he basically told me that he wouldn't invest in my business because there's not enough talent out here. And I just think about so what did he mean by talent? And because I have a group of people that would go to war with me. Like that we're battle tested. Like we've gone through tough times with burns and do they know how to hack into the Pentagon or know some coding? No, but we find a problem and we figure out how to solve it. And they're just good people. And there's all sorts of good people out here. And I'm looking at manufacturing, right? How many people grew up on a farm that they can't be on the farm because their family couldn't keep it, but they have these great set of hand skills? They're all throughout the Midwest. And there's people that have this pioneer spirit that just figure out how do I make this work, right? And so they're around us all over the place. I don't advertise in the newspaper really for people for jobs. I just kind of keep if I meet somebody that's cool or somebody that I think's a good person, and I kind of keep people in mind. Hey, they would be good at some point in our growth over here in the business. And if I feel that they're not happy, if they're going through that down cycle in their business or whatever, it's like, hey, if just come talk to us, And sometimes it doesn't match up. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years for it to match up, the timing to match up. But I think people that are willing to show up, and I think we have a lot of this. That's just what we grew up. And I think I was doing these workplace that people want after the pandemic before. So basically Trina, she's my rock star head technician. She worked at a processor that, packaging meat and but she took care of youth sports, and she coached a lot of the youth sports and basketball, and she wanted to start coaching the high school basketball team and our girls basketball team. When she was assistant coach, they went on a heck of a run. I mean, Nathan was a great head coach too, but what I would do is during the basketball season, she needed to leave at 3 to go coach. And so we just had hey, we need 40 hours from you to get this stuff done. We'll shift around the work schedule during basketball season. We have people that have kids, the kids come and they play after work here, or if they're sick, they're sitting in the chair over, and people check in on them. And so we've made a work environment like that before people were looking for that at COVID. COVID was kind of that breaking point. And so I can hire the talent, again, more air quotes. And there's just a lot of intangibles. And then the thing about it is I just recognize people for the strengths that they have. I don't try to put them a square peg in a round hole, right? I'll like if I misjudge somebody's talents, like I'll go to the nth degree to shift them somewhere else in the business, and it might take a year or two, but we're talking about that as we're progressing with it. And I don't know.
I love it. Your story with the person in Omaha is actually similar to the exact story that we had in starting this podcast. So I was doing a IT leadership training, and I was in a conversation with somebody who's very high up in like a Fortune 100 company. And we got in a discussion about remote work. And he was saying like, well, I think that the time, everything's going to be changing. Everyone's going to go back to the office. We're going to be more regional and in person. And I was like, well, there's so many good people out in these rural communities. And I was like, my company, who I work for now, wouldn't have access to me. And it is very short-sighted on a lot of these big companies. So they just think the world revolves around their metro area. And no, that every small town and everyone has amazing people in it and amazing things to learn. And that's when we came up with this idea for the podcast, because we're like, man, I don't want to just hear the same business people. They do the cycle on every podcast. I want to hear somebody who's been doing it in Southwest Nebraska for the last 50 years or 20 years or whatever, because I'm probably going to learn different things and it's going to be more applicable and it's just probably going to be more valuable.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. I really like what you said about the intangibles in the word talent. I also will gladly use air quotes when I say the word talent, because you're spot on. What in the world does that mean? And now you have a workplace where the high school coach can just arrange their schedule and still get all the work done, still provide all the value, but then go be a member of the community. Or, I've had jobs before where I could take my little kids and my 2-year-old sitting in an office chair, and people are coming and bringing. That's an environment people want. And the thing about talent is most skill sets can be trained, right? But you can't find those things that you're talking about. The people who will show up, who have a shared value, shared mission. That's huge. That's powerful. And I think it's really impressive to come at a rural manufacturing conglomerate someday. It sounds like you're acquiring some stuff. But from that perspective, and it's fascinating. And I think it could be exactly what a small town America needs, because small town America doesn't need, for example, I'll go and throw this out there because I don't think it's going to hurt anyone's feelings. We're all familiar with Cabela's in Nebraska. Yeah. Sidney, Nebraska. Mm-hmm. I don't know how big Sidney, Nebraska is. Pretty big, 30, 40,000 at its height. I don't know. Sidney, Nebraska existed purely because Cabela's was headquartered there. And then Cabela's sold. And with that went the town. Sidney, Nebraska is a shell of what it was not that long ago when Cabela sold. So your insights since 2005. So that means you've been going down this road for 18 years. You've learned these things, these business techniques and tactics and principles, like you said, textbook learning, but you put them into a mindset of the kind of people that live in a rural area. You're going to find different workers in Binkelman, Nebraska than you would in Denver or New York or Silicon Valley. Good or bad, they're different. It's just a different kind of environment. And to take your learnings and apply it to a small town and say, someday I'm going to make 2,000 middle-class jobs. That's amazing. It's really impressive. I have probably the hardest hitting question for you, though, of this entire podcast. Are you a dog lover? Okay. Yeah. So that what I've been thinking this entire time, and I appreciate Tanner staying on focus about business. The entire time I'm thinking of, how did you land into animal prosthetics or bracing? I know you helped out. You said you helped out a veterinarian once and did some stuff. And was that just your aha moment?
Yeah. So I go off script a lot, right? So I go outside of textbooks and so I started making the braces for that veterinarian that was on Animal Planet, and I was like, nobody's written a textbook for this. Like, everything that I'm doing is new to the world. And it was just a fun, creative place to play.
So you're not only trying to revitalize a rural downtown area, create 2,000 middle-class jobs, but you're kind of starting an industry. Way to put a lot on your shoulders. Holy cow.
I guess I don't. Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, I'm not the only one. There's a few others that are around the country, but it's a small niche in what's going on with it, and it's tough because I go back to my professional society, like that research that we have going through the University of Cambridge, one of the most prolific colleges in the world, and I submit it to go to our professional society in this. Like, no, we help humans. We don't help animals. It's like, oh, come on, man. Like, so that'll be another 20 years before the get adoption in that. But that's all right. I've always kind of been the odd duck anyway, and so I'm all right playing.
I think a missed point of this entire story and your entire business, I wrote down the notes. A dog tears their ACL more often than humans. I didn't know that. Fascinating. The average ACL surgery is what, $8,000? A lot of dog owners can't afford an $8,000 surgery. So what happens to the dog, right? They get put down. I'm assuming. I think, and correct me if I'm out of line. I'm making, jumping to conclusions here. But if you can't pay surgery for a pet, usually the only other option is to put them down. And these braces are providing mobility.
So they can crate them and put them in a crate for 12 weeks and things like that. But people want to help them if they're injured.
It's a compassion. It's a compassionate industry too. It's really cool, and I think it's going to connect with a lot of people. You made the joke about moving out to dog lovers to Boulder. Maybe hopefully you don't have to move out to Boulder unless you want to, but that the fact that people look at Boulder as, a bunch of hippie dog lovers is exactly why you probably have a business, right? Because I think people want to do the best for their pets. And it's really cool that this 18-year journey from helping out some vet who was on Animal Planet and doing all this crazy stuff. This is a wild story. And I'm really impressed with kind of your stick-to-itness. I know that's not a word, but you really went and fought some battles and hit some walls, and here you are trying to acquire other companies. Is really impressive.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
We always talk about people being problem solvers too, and you took your knowledge of prosthetics and then saw that opportunity with the vet world too, and you can just I can solve this problem, and clearly there's enough demand, and then figuring out other problems that are tangential to it and can get you going to your mission, which is fantastic. So yeah, no, it's a really, really interesting story. We're just a little over an hour, so we can wrap it up. Ben, if you want to kind of tell people where they can find you online and a little bit more about that.
So Hero Braces is goherogo.com. The boots is medipaw.com. The foot orthotics is henhat.co. We didn't talk about Acme Printing. Our printing company is acmeprint.co. And we have a back brace. It's wiggleless.com. So lots of different places.
Well, that's fantastic. We'll have to dive deeper on another interview too, on some of your other acquisitions and companies and things that how you're progressing. So fantastic.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. Like I have so many notes. I just wanted to talk forever, but then I looked at the time, and we don't want to spend more of your time. We greatly appreciate you coming on our show, talking about this stuff. Really, probably a little blindsided, probably not knowing what to expect from Tanner and I, but we really appreciate it. We absolutely will. Give all of your shout outs, all of your links, and all of our social media, and share all that information with our followers. And we encourage our followers to check Ben and his empire out.
Yep.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. This has been fun.
All right. Yeah. Well, and again, thank you to everyone who's been listening. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to any of the feeds. 5-star ratings on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those things help a ton. Likes on YouTube promotes the algorithm, so Wyatt can go through these random comments that we get now and battle all the trolls.
It's my favorite pastime.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody next week.